Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's 7 o'clock on the Eastern Seaboard, and that means it's time for UnX News Radio, your news source for all things paranormal. And your host, Margie K.
For the first time on radio, we're going to hear from someone who was a witness to the UFO sighting in Illinois, where there were mass sightings and a giant UFO was chased by police. And this is a new witness on the Missouri side. So that will be coming up here in just a couple of minutes. Later on in the program, at the bottom of the hour, we're going to bringing on Stanton Friedman. And, of course, he always has a lot to talk about. We're going to talk about his new book and new movie project that he's working on. First, I want to tell you about Travis Walton, who's going to be in the greater Kansas City area, actually in Liberty, Missouri, on September the 3rd, 2012. He's going to be speaking that evening. There will be a dinner at 5 p.m., and then the movie at 6, and then Travis Walton will speak at 7:30. The movie, of course, is Fire in the Sky, which was made after he wrote the book Fire in the Sky. And this is the most well-documented UFO case in history, so you don't want to miss this. It's only $16 per person, and you do need to register in advance at MissouriMUFON.org. That's MissouriMUFON.org. And again, that is September the 3rd, 2012. My first guest this evening we're not going to be using his real name, so we're going to call him Joe. He is a witness to the year 2000 event where a very large UFO was sighted, and we think that this might be related to the Illinois case at the same time. So this happened in January of the year 2000. Welcome to the program, Joe.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk to me. Now, we've been in contact the past several days. How this came about was, I believe you contacted Roger Marsh, who's the editor of the MUFON Journal.
I had contacted Roger because I had some information that I hadn't seen in any other reports of the incident back then, and I thought he would be interested in it.
And so was I. This is quite incredible because your story starts in Missouri, and this is the first time anybody has come forward with any information on the Missouri side. So let's kind of start from the beginning and say, how did you first hear about this?
Well, I was an assistant fire chief out on a fire call in one of the neighboring towns. And we were investigating a house fire because I was an arson investigator. And when we finished up there, it was about a little after 3 in the morning. And I was listening to all the radio traffic in my vehicle coming across from the Illinois side because back then a lot of the radio stations for the fire service and police departments all kind of transmitted on the same frequencies, but because of the distance, they didn't really interfere with one another.
Mm-hmm.
So that time of the morning, you could really pick up signals coming across there to see and listen to their traffic and what was going on, and there was quite a bit of it. And generally, that time of the morning, there's not hardly any traffic on the radios. So I got to listening to it, and I had heard them talking about police officers kind of chasing some type of object in the sky over there, which kind of sparked my interest. So as we cleaned up and got done on the scene there, I was heading back towards my residence when I picked up some radio traffic from our local sheriff's department and the local police department that were talking about this object that they were watching. So I took a drive over. It was about 10 miles. And when I got there, I found there was 2 police officers at an intersection. One was a county officer, and the other was a city officer. And they were watching this subject, or this craft, I guess. It was up about 500 feet above about them and about 1,000 yards out in front of them. And what I could notice were 3 lights directly underneath it, white lights, one in each corner. This thing was a triangular shape, and it had a red light in the center towards the back that was blinking like a communications tower would blink. And across the back of it had 3 lights across the back and lights that scrolled back and forth, kind of white and different multicolored lights across the back of it.
Mm-hmm.
So as I came down the hill and I parked in behind them, I just started to walk up to them, and about the time I got close to their vehicles, this thing decided to move off. So they jumped in their cars and went down another roadway in pursuit of this thing. I couldn't keep up with them because I wasn't running red lights or anything like that, and they were. I finally caught up to them again. And it seems like this thing would go about a half a mile, and then it would stop. So I decided to just get out of my car again and see if I could get up there to talk to the 2 police officers, and it stayed there long enough for us to, the one county officer, I believe, was trying to fix his dash cam upward to take pictures of this. But apparently it was bolted in to the point where it wouldn't move up. They have them bolted in so they point directly in the front back then, in the front of the cars. I guess today I've seen some of the police officers be able to turn their cameras in any direction they want to, but back then they couldn't.
Right.
So there was absolutely no pictures. And what was strange about this craft is when you were underneath this thing, there was no sound. Absolutely nothing. And here's the, I don't know if you want me to give this part of it out, but this is what sparked me to talk to Roger Marsh. The radio traffic, when we were directly underneath it, was like somebody had keyed up a very strong microphone on the radio, and everything went dead. There was no getting in, no getting out, no talking to dispatchers or anything. There was no radio traffic at all.
Wow.
So when this thing moved off again, you could hear static in the background. You could hear other cars over in Illinois jibber-jabbering over there. And once we got back underneath it again, this occurred. So I don't know. I'm not going to say this is a craft from outer space, but this sure looked funny for something for our government to have. I don't think we've got anything that can float like that.
Well, I think we have some drones now that might be able to do that. But, you know, how big do you think this thing was?
In my estimate, probably a football-sized field in diameter. And the side walls on the thing had to be at least 12 to 20 feet high. I don't know. It's hard to tell in the dark like that because on the sides there was no lighting, but you could see a silhouette from it.
Now, when you first saw that, was that near the Walmart at 47 and 50?
The old Walmart that used to be there. I think it's called Dicky Bub's now on Highway 47.
What was your first thought about, you know, when you first saw it?
Well, when I first saw something like that, it just, well, I don't know, I guess it kind of scares you. You don't know what's going on at first. I didn't even think this was the thing they were talking about over in Illinois. But then when I heard the radio traffic over in the Union, Missouri area, I decided to investigate it. Now, when I left the 2 police officers, the county officer got a call and he left before, we chased this craft. After it left the 3rd time from under us, it seemed like it knew we were watching it. And every time we get close, this thing would pull off just far enough out of our reach to where we had to really run the chase to catch up to it. But when the county officer left, the union officer looked at me and said, I didn't see anything, got back in his car and left. So that kind of left me standing out there holding everything, and I just said, well, okay, I'm not going to chase this thing any further. So I left.
You said it stopped several times as you were following it. Did it stop over anything in particular?
No, this was, residential areas. It didn't really go right over the city limits of, well, it did to a point, but not over real populated areas. I mean, it was over a highway, and we did see there was a paper man. He was delivering newspapers, and then there was a semi-truck coming down Highway 50. But I think they were more interested in looking at the lights on the police car than what we were looking at.
Oh, so you think maybe they were noticing, watching the policeman rather than this object?
Well, yeah, because I'm sitting there in a plain vehicle, and they got lights running. They thinking the cops have got somebody pulled over. So,
okay. Well, you said it had lights on the bottom of it. Now, these lights were shining down?
They were. They were shining directly down. And as it came within about, I would say, 10 feet of the ground, it didn't illuminate the ground at all. You could see the beam of light coming down, and it just like stops.
That's really strange. You said it stopped about 100 feet off the ground when we talked earlier. I have a case in Kansas City where the woman describes almost to a T this craft that you have described, and this is just over the state line in Kansas. She said she thought it happened around 1999 to 2000. She couldn't remember the exact year. But she also said she saw lights beam down, really, really super bright lights, but they did not hit the ground.
Right.
She could see no light on the ground.
Good. And I've never heard this case before. I didn't know anybody else had ever seen this thing other than the guys over in Duplo, Illinois, in that area.
Yeah, and I don't even know if it's related. Of course, we don't have an exact date, so, I'm not sure about that, but that is the only other time I have really, of course, we had a lot of reports of black triangles. But
right. Well,
how fast was
early January, and to give you an actual date, I don't remember. That was 12 years ago.
Right.
So, I didn't go home and write any dates or times or anything down, but I can pretty well think back, and that's about when it was early January sometime.
Mm-hmm. So how fast was it moving?
It wasn't moving fast at all. I don't know. When it started to move off, I guess it wasn't much more than maybe a fast jog. And then it would go about quarter to a half a mile, and it would stop. Now, I've seen hot air balloons as they travel. They kind of lift up in the air, and then they travel, and they come back down, and they lift up. But this was not doing that. This thing just moved smooth as it could be across the treetops, and it didn't vary when it came to a hillside with trees. It just kept a straight line.
I see. So it stayed at the same altitude.
Yeah.
Okay. And did you see any navigation lights, a red and green light, any wings or tail, anything like that?
No, it was completely triangled. It had a contour in the back, and like I said, it had the scrolling lights across the back, and it had 3 large lights across the back, one on each corner and one in the middle.
Uh-huh.
And now underneath it, it had 3 lights beaming straight down like spotlights, and then it had a red light towards the rear but in the center, and it was blinking on and off, kind of like a beacon light does on a tower. Now, it wasn't really protruding out. It was like a straight cylinder coming down type light. It wasn't I don't know what you would call it. Somebody said a half moon. Did it look like a half moon? I said, no, it was just more like a tube coming down, and it had a light that was blinking out of it.
I see. And you made a model of this.
I did, because I'm not an artist.
Well, you're a really great model maker. I've got the pictures that you sent me, I put on the website at margiek.com. So if our listeners want to see what your model looks like, they can go to that and then just click on the UnX News Radio page and you'll see the pictures. And also there is a link there to that other case in Illinois where several police officers followed this large object through several towns. And, so we have really credible witnesses looking at this. And there are some drawings on the site, where you're going to click a link to that these police officers made. And this is so similar to your model. I mean, it's got to be the same thing.
Before now is I was in government work for many, many years, and I'm now retired. Mm-hmm. And I've moved away from that area, and I live in a different state. But I had information that I didn't think your investigators had, and I wanted to bring it to them. And that was the part of no radio transmitting underneath the craft. It just like it was blocked completely out. Now,
that's some type of electromagnetic interference.
System of the craft that was knocking the radios out, or if it was just something that they were doing to jam all radio frequencies. I know we've got the capability to do that in our own Air Force, but.
Mm-hmm. And you said there was absolutely no sound.
There was no sound. Of course, now you got to remember the time of the day, the time of the year, which is January, 3:30 in the morning. It's cold outside. There's not many birds singing. There's not many dogs chirping or barking, and there's not crickets chirping, and things like that. So there's not a lot of sound around.
Yeah, it'd be very quiet.
But there's no sound. There was no sound from the craft. No.
Uh-huh. Now, was there much traffic on the roads at that time?
No, like I said, there was only the one vehicle, and he was, according to the police officer, that was the local newspaper guy. He was heading into town. And then there was a semi-truck that went by. And I didn't even look to see what kind of truck it was. I mean, we were busy watching the thing up, and I just took a quick glance down and looked and saw it was a semi-truck.
Well, there aren't that many people out at that time of night, like you said, but I just wonder if there aren't some other witnesses that might come forward now if we go public with this again and see if anybody else does come forward.
Like I said, the police officer from the city looked at me when he got back in his car. He said, I didn't see anything, and he left. And the county police officer had another call that was pending, and he said, well, I can't chase this anymore, and he got in his car and left. So, there was probably no police report made of it other than what the Illinois side put out.
Did you have a cell phone with you at the time?
No, I didn't.
And when
I had a two-way radio, that's all.
Were you talking to anybody else on your radio at the time?
No, I have it with me in case I need to talk to our dispatcher. We were out investigating a fire, and we don't really do a lot of radio traffic because we don't want to bother because we were on the county's frequency. Mm-hmm. And they've got a lot of other radio traffic on there for ambulances and things like that, and we really don't tie that up unless it is an emergency. And I figure standing there with two other officers, they've already called this in, so I didn't even bother to call or say anything about it.
I see. Did you tell anyone else about it when you got back the next day?
No, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't said anything to anybody in 12 years about it. My wife about hit the floor when I started talking about it.
Really? What is she upset that you're talking about it, or is she glad?
No, not really. She was just kind of puzzled that I haven't said anything to her about it, because I'm the type of person that feels other people look at these and think that, well, there's a nutcase, And I didn't really want those looks for the last 12 years from my wife, and so I've kind of kept this story to myself.
Well, I think some of that stigma is gone because there are so many people now that have seen things, and they're coming forward. They're more open about it. And all the TV coverage.
And I read about it every day on the internet. I can read about people coming forward, people that used to work in the CIA, saying that things happened in Roswell were absolutely correct, and I don't know. I still hold my reserve back on some of that. I don't know.
Well, I would say you definitely saw something highly unusual. Did the object ever turn?
I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
You're cutting out on me a little bit. I couldn't hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. I say I hope my information might help an investigator in the future to he's got something he can work with. He can take to people when they start reporting these. He's got something he can ask more questions of them of. If other people have seen this same craft, they should probably be coming up with the same answers, type thing.
Absolutely. And, I'm just very grateful that you did come forward with this information. And now we have another piece of the puzzle, possibly, from that 2000 case in January from Illinois. Perhaps this object came into Missouri. And, I would say, given the circumstances and the description that you gave, it probably is the same object. And maybe some more witnesses will come forward and we'll be able to track this thing and see how it actually left. That's the big question to me, is when did it first appear and when it left, how did it leave? Because that might give us a clue too as to its source.
Well, that's what I was really concerned about myself, because there was a piece of that puzzle. I have seen the older documentations on this years ago about Dupo, Illinois, and over on the Illinois side. But after talking to the director over there from MUFON, he said it went into the St. Louis area and people there saw it. So if that's the case, maybe it turned and came south down off of the interstate towards the Union, Missouri area, and from there it disappeared across country.
Yes, because Union is not that far from St. Louis.
No, about 20 miles.
And perhaps so, and if this case in Kansas is indeed related, then it went across the entire state of Missouri. If that happened, how many more people might have seen it?
Well, that time in the morning, I would imagine there's somebody getting up to go to work and has to have seen something.
Yes, absolutely. Or maybe there was more than one. We are live today, so we're taking questions from chat. If anybody does have a question, you can put that in all caps in the chat room, and Race will forward that to me so you can ask questions. I've got to ask you, Joe, how has this changed your life since you saw that? Do you have a new outlook on life now?
Well, I don't know. Like I said, I'm not really believing this came from a different planet. But for us to walk around on this little planet and think that there's not life somewhere else out there, we're kind of foolish. I don't believe our Creator built that entire universe just for us. I can't believe that. I'm sorry. I had to get that out there.
Well, what do you think that was? The object you saw?
Well, it could have been a number of things. We could be developing stealth. I mean, that time of the morning, what better way to keep things under wrap? I mean, we had the F-18 fighter jet under wraps for 15 years, I guess. I don't know. And a lot of those sightings were also written off as UFOs. And this could be a big ploy for our government to, let's fly this thing at night, dark, stealth, nobody can see it. And if anybody does, they'll just think they're a bunch of crackpots.
Except for the bright lights, of course.
But I think the more people that come forward with this and tell their story, I think there's going to be less and less credibility to our own government. whether it's their crafts, whether it's a craft from a different solar system, visiting us or something in that retrospect, they're going to have to come out eventually and tell the general public. I think we're getting old enough now and smart enough now that most people can handle something like this.
That's what most people in the UFO community think. They think we're ready for a disclosure, that the people can handle it, and yet we're still waiting. So, this is just another piece to the puzzle.
There was an old saying from a movie, and I won't say which one it was, that people are smart. Population is stupid. And I really, really kind of believe that. I mean, if you get a bunch of people together, they're not going to be as smart as the individual.
Yes, that's true. I've got a question from the chat room real quick. Besides the radio interference, did you have any physical effects from the sighting?
No, we didn't. Did my face turn orange? No. We didn't get directly underneath the lights. So I didn't get a bad sunburn or anything like that. And no, we didn't feel any health issues at the time. I have health issues now, but I think that's just old age.
Okay, Joe, we've run out of time, and I want to really thank you again for taking time out to share this with us. We really, really appreciate it.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Well, we are going to take a short break, and when we come back, my guest, Stanton Friedman.
Paranormal powerhouse of alternative talk radio. The new Global Radio Alliance. The Global Radio Alliance currently has spots available for radio show sponsorships and global radio advertising. Have you given any thought to your target demographic? Global Radio Alliance has you covered. Advertising on the Alliance gives you multiple opportunities to advertise on a wide variety of radio show broadcasts, and we have one to fit almost every advertising need and budget. Internet radio has exhibited phenomenal listener growth, and recent Arbitron Edison surveys have shown that online radio boosts at least 33 million unique visitors each week, and over 54 million each month. And these listeners are a part of many businesses' core demographics. Surveys have shown that internet radio listeners are far more likely to buy items online at a much higher rate than all other market segments. Internet radio also enables businesses to connect with consumers during work hours, where increasingly more lifestyle decisions are being made. Advertise with the best. The Global Radio Alliance offers fully functioning audio production studios and a professional graphics and advertising agency to help you with just about every advertising need. Go to www.globalradioalliance.com or call us toll free at 1-855-472-5483 and get the word out. Go global. Get results with the new Global Radio Alliance.
For a little ride.
Now you can share the topics that drive the discussions of your favorite talk shows with TalkStream Live's topic-driven talk radio.
We gotta talk. Let's take a drive.
List and promote real-time talk radio topics, or post the topics that you want to hear. Hot topics are tweeted and retweeted and include simple click-to-listen audio links. The future of talk radio is topic-driven talk radio.
Well, that's what I call real drive.
Available now at TalkStreamLive.com.
UnX News Magazine covers the hottest topics in our unexplained world. Leading investigators in their fields discuss real events experienced by real people. Topics include UFOs, ET encounters, ghost hunting, interdimensional travel, ley lines, Bigfoot, crop circles, and much more. Writers include Grant Cameron, Art Campbell, Mac Maloney, Lauren Cutts, and others. Regular features include a list of the best paranormal radio shows, paranormal associations, and the Astrology Corner by Linda Berry. Get your printed copy or download the quarterly UnX News magazine at lulu.com or unxnews.com. Visit unxnews.com for more information. That's unxnews.com.
The publisher of UnX News Magazine is Margie Kay, host of the UnX News Radio, airing Fridays at 8 p.m. Eastern on the Global Radio Alliance.
Oh! I am so tired of struggling with my company's advertising issues when I have a business to run. What am I going to do?
4-Leaf Creative is your one-stop advertising shop. We handle everything from branding and logo design, print, outdoor, online, broadcast, signage, publication ads, and more. You name it, and we'll do it. See our ad and names and numbers and visit 4leafcreative.com today. 4-Leaf Creative. This is your lucky day. Join us on Facebook for GRA alerts, show announcements, giveaways, up-to-date news and alternative media, and more. Everything you need in one place. Facebook, search Global Radio Alliance and like us. Hit the like button and have a shot at winning your favorite DVDs, CDs, autographed books, tickets to your favorite conferences, expos, and symposiums, and more. Be connected to the best alternative talk radio network on the planet. The new Global Radio Alliance.
Margie Kay. We're back with UnX News Radio, and my guest this evening is nuclear physicist Stanton Friedman. Stanton received his BSc and MSc degrees in physics from the University of Chicago in 1955 and 1956. He was employed for 14 years as a nuclear physicist by such companies as GE, GM, Westinghouse, TRW Systems, Aerojet General Nucleonics, and McDonnell Douglas, working in such highly advanced, classified, eventually canceled programs as nuclear aircraft, fission and fusion rockets, and various compact nuclear power plants for space and terrestrial applications. He became interested in UFOs in 1958, and since 1967 has lectured about them at more than 600 colleges and 100 professional groups in 50 U.S. states and many more. And he's published more than 90 UFO papers. He's appeared on TV programs. I know you've seen him everywhere. You know Stanton Friedman. Welcome to the program, Stanton.
I'm delighted to be on again from beautiful downtown Fredericton, New Brunswick.
Well, how is the weather there?
It was beautiful today in the mid-70s, very comfortable, no humidity to worry about. It's a great place to be. I mean, the winters are a little rough.
Well, at least it is nice
had 13
somewhere
feet of snow.
today.
What
We've been having
temperature
some
is it there?
terrible heat wave here in the Midwest and drought, just super bad.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
I think it's the worst it's been since the Dust Bowl, they were saying yesterday. So anyway, we're plugging along, and of course, always interested in UFOs, and my audience is interested in UFOs. I've got to ask you a question. You got interested in UFOs in 1958. What prompted that interest?
Just a lucky accident. I was ordering books from Marlboro Books, a discount book place. I was a young nuclear physicist working for General Electric Aircraft Nuclear Propulsion Program. And I needed one more book so I wouldn't have to pay shipping. I'm a cheapskate. And there was the report on unidentified flying objects by Air Force Captain Edward J. Ruppelt, who had been head of Project Blue Book in the early 50s. Marked down from $2.95. This is a hardcover book to $1. I still have it. And I figured, what the heck? It wasn't going to cost me anything because the shipping would have been $1 if I hadn't ordered it. And the Air Force was co-sponsor of our program with the Atomic Energy Commission. That year, we only spent $100 million and employed 3,500 people, so it was a pretty good-sized program. And I figured if these things were real, and I didn't have an opinion because I didn't know anything, that's a strange viewpoint. I know that. Everybody's supposed to have opinions about everything. But I figured if these things were real and they used nuclear energy, it would help our program. And so I also figured it really wasn't costing me anything. So if it turned out to be a bunch of baloney, it really wouldn't matter. Well, the book intrigued me. It turns out, in retrospect, it was a very lucky first book, and I've had other people tell me the same thing. It didn't convince me, but it intrigued the heck out of me, and then I shared it with a neighbor. Charlie was 10 years older than I was, an engineer, and he was more impressed than I was, and that impressed me. Anyway, I moved out to California. I had a good librarian, read a dozen more books, some of which were trash. And then I ran across, it was an epiphany almost, I ran across a copy of Project Blue Book, Special Report number 14, largest study ever done for the United States Air Force. And what shocked me, this was University of California, Berkeley Library in about 1961, and it hadn't been mentioned in any of the other books that I'd read, which one would think it would have been. It was chock full of data. I was in data heaven. Over 240 charts, tables, graphs, and maps. Wow! But the guy who put this thing together so to make it available had included the official Air Force press release, October 1955. And the Secretary of the Air Force is quoted, and he lied through his teeth. That shook me up. I wasn't accustomed to being lied to, and naive as I was at age 24. But I was a little older by that time. But he said, on the basis of this report, we believe that no objects such as those properly described as flying saucers have overflown the United States. Even the unknown 3% could have been identified as conventional phenomena or illusions if more complete observational data had been available. That sounds very good, but I had the report. The unknowns weren't 3%, they were 21.5%. And there was a separate category for insufficient information, another 9.3%. Well, that shook me up. I mean, I was working under security, and sometimes you tiptoe around the truth a little bit to avoid revealing classified information. But flat-out lies from the Secretary of the Air Force, Donald Quarles was his name, incidentally, that got me determined to find out what the heck gives here. Must be important if you're going to lie about it, and so blatantly. And, it was interesting. The press release didn't mention who did the work, which was Battelle Memorial Institute in Columbus, Ohio, which is a major research and development company. It didn't give the titles, even the title of the report, no less, of the people who did the report. Surely, if they had said Blue Book Special Report 14, somebody in the press would have said, Well, what do you mean 14? What happened to 1 through 13? We've never heard anything about them. Had they been honest, the answer would have been they're all classified, buddy. So that gave me the real impetus to join APRO and NICAP, the two major groups back then. MUFON came along after them. And it got me determined. I got their newsletters. Now, I didn't give my first do my first public presentation until I moved to Pittsburgh. Frank Edwards had sent me a copy of his book, Flying Saucers Serious Business, in the mid-'60s. And I had gotten to know Frank because I worked for General Motors in Indianapolis, which is where he was based. And I told him, gee, Frank, you know everybody. Give me some names. I want to go public here in Pittsburgh, where I was working on nuclear fission rockets at that time. We actually tested some of those on the ground. Very exciting. Anyway, he gave me some contacts, and I called the producer of, I love the title of the program, Contact. Remember there was a movie by that name?
Oh, yes, one of my favorites. Jodie Foster.
Yeah, right. And I called the producer, and I expected he'd want to have me on. I mean, if you work as a nuclear physicist for Westinghouse in Pittsburgh, those are gold-plated credentials. He didn't care. Don't call us, we'll call you. Well, as it happened, less than a month later, he called me. Not because he was interested, but because somebody had canceled at the last minute, and he calls me at 6:30 to do a 7 o'clock show.
Oh, my.
Somebody at work at Westinghouse heard me on the show. It was on KDKA, which is one of the bigger old-time radio stations, and I've been on it a number of times since. But the gal called me, and her book review club was reading Frank's book, and she wondered if I'd give a lecture in her living room. Sure, why not? So I did. That was my first lecture, and I did the show many times and did a lot more lectures. And what really got to me was the enthusiastic response of my professional colleagues. I mean, I gave a talk at Carnegie Mellon University. That was very well received. And the guy who booked it liked it so much he sent a letter to the agent through whom he had booked the other speakers in his series, and they booked me at the Engineering Society of Detroit. And they were sold out for 3 weeks in advance for 1,008 people for dinner and a talk, and there wasn't any negativity at all.
Amazing.
And then Los Alamos National Lab, a guy I knew from there, they were working on nuclear rockets too, he called me, how about speaking to their local section of the American Nuclear Society? Oh, I'd love to. No, I mean on an expense account, Stan. Oh, I don't make those decisions. Let me check with management. They paid for me to go to Los Alamos to give a lecture, Flying Saucers Are Real, to the local section of the American Nuclear Society. And over 500 people and no negativity either. So when the bottom fell out of the advanced nuclear and space systems business, which it did, I went full-time ufologizing, if I can make up a word. And I've been at it ever since. That was a long time ago, 1970. So I've been very fortunate, Margie. I've spoken in all 50 states and in 10 Canadian provinces and 18 other countries, but I've also done hundreds of radio and television programs, which I really enjoy. And so I've had a chance to sample what people really think about this subject. And I've done some, you could say, strange things. At the end of my lectures, I have often asked, how many people here believe they've seen what I would consider to be a flying saucer? And I just want to find out some numbers, and I make a joke we didn't let the CIA in tonight. Just raise your hand. So I point and count. And the first hands that go up barely over the head, you know. By the time I get to the other side of the hall, the hands go up vigorously. Everybody thinks they're the only one, you see. Typically 10% of the people believe they've seen one. But then I ask, how many of you reported what you saw? 90% of the hands go down. So I've had a chance to put my toe in the water, so to speak, pretty deeply. Incidentally, if there's still people who did report, I'll ask how many were in the military. And if there's still some, I'll ask them if they want to tell us about it. And I get some great response from those people. So, I get people telling me, oh, you must get a hard time coming on so strong with a title like Flying Saucers Are Real, I said, no, I don't. I've only had 11 hecklers and over 700 lectures, and 2 of them were drunk. You get that many if you talk about sports, religion, politics, So I've been very fortunate. I've spoken at more MUFON symposia than anybody. I'll be speaking at the 2012 one in Covington, Kentucky, right across from Cincinnati, August the 2nd through the 5th, I guess. And, I've been very lucky. I do a monthly column for the MUFON Journal, get feedback from that. So I've really had a chance to probe, and, the interest is everywhere. Last year I spoke in Saudi Arabia, would you believe, and in Poland, and in Brazil, and in St. John's, Newfoundland. Can't get too much further out than that. And a whole bunch of states and so forth. So I mention that not to brag, but to let people know that there are a lot of people interested all over the world, from Australia to Korea to China. I've spoken in, and Turkey and Israel and European countries, South American countries. People are interested, and I've been at most of the annual festivals at the International UFO Museum and Research Center in Roswell, because I'm the original civilian investigator of the Roswell incident. And people come from all over the world, and I must say, if you're in Roswell, it's because you want to be there, because it isn't on the way to anywhere.
Right.
200 miles, from Albuquerque, and 200 miles from Amarillo, and 200 miles from El Paso. So they come from all over. They've had almost 3 million visitors at the museum there.
Golly.
And considering where they are, that's a pretty darn good record. Lots of interest there.
No, it really sounds
strong.
like the world is ready to hear disclosure.
Well, it depends on how you define disclosure, I guess. I've been arguing with some people about that. I am not in favor of putting everything out on the table. I think there may be some national security matters with what kind of information we've learned about technology. And certainly if the Russians and Chinese and Brits and so forth aren't going to put out what they know, why should we? I'm a dual citizen of the United States and Canada, so I say we, sometimes meaning one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, the world may be ready for disclosure. I wish they would say, various government people, that, look, we've been studying this matter for a very long time. We're convinced the planet's being visited, and we've scheduled international conferences dealing with the economic and political and religious aspects, psychological, of the fact that we can no longer think of ourselves as being alone and on top of the heap. And, we're at a particularly important moment in time, so to speak. We've gone through, different positions. Ptolemy, the Greek astronomer, had the Earth as the center of the universe, and everything went around it. I mean, just look at the sky. The moon, the sun, the stars all move around the Earth. Can't you see? Just look up there. And then Copernicus came along, 1543, and said, no, sorry, that doesn't work. The sun is the middle of the universe, not the Earth. The Earth goes around the sun. And Copernicus died the same year he published the book in which he had the gall to say such a silly thing. And so his book was banned for 300 years by the church, because the Earth is too the center of the universe.
Goodness.
And now we suddenly realize that, you know what, The Earth isn't the center of the universe. These aren't the only planets. We're not the oldest place around. And, the universe was probably created 13 billion years ago, and the Earth 5 billion, almost 4.5 billion. We're not the big shots we'd like to think we are. Now, some people don't want to hear that, you understand.
Mm-hmm.
But, so right now, we're reevaluating our role, partly because of that magnificent Kepler satellite out there, which is finding new planets all the time. It wasn't too long ago we said this was the only solar system in all of creation. Now we have to say, no, there's probably a few billion planets in our own galaxy, plus billions of other galaxies, each of them with billions of planets. And, we haven't had civilization very long. First radio signals only went out long distance, 1901, Marconi. So we have to expect that the guys out there and gals are probably a lot more advanced than we are. Oh dear, that's hard to handle, isn't it? So this is a time when our kids may grow up with or my great-grandson may grow up with a very different view of the importance of mankind in the larger scheme of things. Mm-hmm. And that's good. That's good.
Do you think that the government has back-engineered some of these craft, and that's where some of our latest technologies come from?
Well, it's a good question. I don't think we've built our own that can compete with the alien ones. I think we may have learned some interesting things. And, what makes a research and development program more likely to be successful, I've worked on a number of them, is knowing what you're trying to accomplish can be done. For example, with regard to nuclear weapons, the Russians knew that you could build atomic bombs because the United States built or tested 5 of them by the end of 1946. Now, Hitler, during the war, did not know that you could build atomic bombs. He had people working on it, but he did know you could build rockets. V1, V2, and they had others on the drawing board. So he spent his money on rockets. But the Russians went right into it. I mean, during the war, they were a little busy. 20 million Russians died during World War II. They had other things on their mind, trying to stay alive. So knowing that saucers can fly in crazy ways might have given us a lot of ideas, but one of the problems you have, even if you figure out something, doesn't mean you can do it. For example, the theory of an atomic bomb is not that complicated. The problem is getting the fissionable material, high enrichment uranium or plutonium. That takes a lot of effort, time, money, etc. Many Americans aren't aware of the fact that during World War II, we built a big facility at Oak Ridge, Tennessee, to enrich uranium. The facility was a mile long.
Wow.
You pumped uranium hexafluoride and kind of nasty gas through little holes in nickel sheet, and the building was a mile long and was using 5% of the electricity generated in the whole country in secret.
Unbelievable.
So the idea was straightforward, getting the enriched material and then building Hanford Works to produce plutonium. That was difficult and expensive and time-consuming and so forth and so on. So we may have, for example, in my book, Flying Saucers in Science, there's a picture of me with my hand on the Apollo 12 command module. I gave a lecture there. The NASA people asked me to speak. And it's a round, blunt body. You know what the command module looks like.
Yes.
Now, when I was growing up, everybody thought a high-speed aircraft had to have a pointy nose, sharp wings, highly streamlined, high melting point materials. Doesn't look like that at all. Now, it may be that somebody said, gee, I wonder, those darn saucers are round. Why don't we look into that, see what kind of lift-to-drag ratios and so forth. They actually ran wind tunnel tests on discs, if you will, back in 47 at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. So the idea for going round instead of pointy-nosed and so forth, like the X-15, may have come from observations of flying saucers.
Mm-hmm.
And another example, it sounds a little strange, but what you would do, I would envision, is the top scientists would send pieces of the wreckage recovered at Roswell out to various classified labs where there were sharp people who could do a lot of investigation. And they might have said, what is this stuff? There are a lot of little pieces of stuff. And the answer came back, well, it's a combination of samarium and cobalt. Why would you put those together? That's not your problem. You send it out to other places, and they came back and tell you, ask them to measure the electrical, the magnetic, the thermal properties. And the guy comes back and says, I don't know what this stuff is or where you got it, but it's got the highest magnetic moment of any material I've ever measured. In other words, it makes great permanent magnets. Thank you very much. And pretty soon you have ghetto blasters. And the magnets and the speakers on those are made out of samarium and cobalt, the highest value permanent magnets. And, I used to use that as an example of learning something. You haven't learned how to fly the saucer, but you learned something useful technologically. And then I did a weekly science commentary for the local CBC radio station here in Fredericton many years ago. And I was reading an article about new and better permanent magnets, neodymium iron boron, believe it or not. And at the end of the article, it said the original work on samarium cobalt was done at Wright Air Development Center at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. I just broke out laughing. I know where they got that idea.
Oh, wow.
But you see my point. You can learn something, and it would be very useful to you, but it doesn't mean you've duplicated the whole ball of wax. It's incremental information. And I certainly hope we've learned a lot from these. The kicker here is if there have been crashes in other countries, and I think there have been, they may have learned the same thing. So why should we put what we know out on the table if they don't put what they know out on the table?
Right.
Not a good thing to do. I just read yesterday, I think, that the new military budget for the United States is going to be $600 billion this year. If we have any advantage over possible enemies, we certainly don't want to give it away.
No, that's true.
And they don't want to
Certainly.
give it to us,
Absolutely. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll continue with Stanton Friedman. Don't go away.
All around the world, the GRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
UnX News Magazine covers the hottest topics in our unexplained world. Leading investigators in their fields discuss real events experienced by real people. Topics include UFOs, ET encounters, ghost hunting, interdimensional travel, ley lines, Bigfoot, crop circles, and much more. Writers include Grant Cameron, Art Campbell, Mac Maloney, Lauren Cutts, and others. Regular features include a list of the best paranormal radio shows, paranormal associations, and the Astrology Corner by Linda Berry. Get your printed copy or download the quarterly UnX News magazine at lulu.com or unxnews.com. Visit unxnews.com for more information. That's unxnews.com.
The publisher of UnX News Magazine is Margie Kay, host of the UnX News Radio, airing Fridays at 8 p.m. Eastern on the Global Radio Alliance.
Oh! I am so tired of struggling with my company's advertising issues when I have a business to run. What am I going to do?
4-Leaf Creative is your one-stop advertising shop. We handle everything from branding and logo design, print, outdoor, online, broadcast, signage, publication ads, and more. You name it, and we'll do it. See our ad and names and numbers and visit 4leafcreative.com today. 4-Leaf Creative. This is your lucky day.
Now you can share the topics that drive the discussions of your favorite talk shows with TalkStream Live's topic-driven talk radio. List and promote real-time talk radio topics or post the topics that you want to hear. Hot topics are tweeted and retweeted and include simple click-to-listen audio links. The future of talk radio is topic-driven talk radio. Available now at TalkStreamLive.com.
Join us on Facebook for GRA alerts, show announcements, giveaways, up-to-date news and alternative media, and more. Everything you need in one place. Facebook search Global Radio Alliance and like us. Hit the like button and have a shot at winning your favorite DVDs, CDs, autographed books, tickets to your favorite conferences, expos, and symposiums, and more. Be connected to the best alternative talk radio network on the planet. The new Global Radio Alliance. You're listening to the new Global Radio Alliance. A new knowledge for a new world.
We are back with UnX News Radio, and I want to remind you to ask questions in the chat room at globalradioalliance.com. Go to the chat room, and you can ask questions in all caps, and then Race will give that to me through Skype, and I will ask Stanton. We're talking with Stanton Friedman this evening. Stanton, you've got a couple of movies coming up. Tell us about that.
Well, I've got my fingers crossed when I say that. Stellar Productions in Hollywood, Bryce Zabel, who did Dark Skies, the television series back a number of years ago.
Yes.
They've optioned, well, they've got two deals going. The first one was they optioned my book, Top Secret Magic, M-A-J-I-C, and Don Schmidt and Tom Carey's book, Witness to Roswell, both of them, for a movie which has been given a name, and Magic Men, M-A-J-I-C. And it'll be interaction, dynamic, exciting, sort of all the President's Men, a little JFK thrown in, about Majestic 12 and Roswell and the ups and downs of doing research when not everybody agrees with everybody.
Mm-hmm.
You have stumbling blocks. And the screenplay's been written for that one. Now, all we need is somebody to come along. If there's anybody listening who'd like to invest a few $1 million, would help us out.
I'm sure there are.
And secondly, the book Captured, the Betty and Barney Hill UFO experience by Kathleen Marden, who's Betty's niece, and myself. She did most of the work. She's got all the tapes. She knew about the story, the case, the day after it happened, way back in 1961. She was a mere broth of a girl then, but and so that one, the screenplay hasn't been written, and the name of that one will be Betty and Barney. And there's a chance, I hate to admit this, but more people watch movies than read books. Although after that little massacre in Aurora, maybe maybe that'll change a little bit. I don't know. So I'm excited about these things because, as I say, they're communication tools. And I'm sure it'll boost the sales of the books, too. But and there's stories, the Majestic 12 story hasn't really been told in the media. And there's a great deal of, how shall I put it, disagreement amongst ufologists. There are some who say there was no MJ-12, it's all baloney. And I say there are 3 genuine documents, there's over 100 phony ones, and I don't care about them. You see, I'm accustomed as a nuclear guy. You'd learn early on that unlike normal life, like I mentioned uranium fission before, the fissionable isotope is only 0.7% of all the uranium atoms. So what? Who cares about the ones that can't fission? You do the right thing, spend a lot of money, and you wind up with highly enriched material, you know.
It's a good analogy.
And so, you know, not everybody is 7 feet tall, but the basketball coach has the good sense to say, I don't care if most people aren't 7 feet tall. Give me one good guy, you know. Who cares about the other 99.5% or whatever it is? So it's paying attention to these things that matter, and I think that Majestic 12, very exciting, and the people in charge of that, the first group, of course, they're all dead now, were very sharp engineers and scientists. They worked during the war and all kinds of far-out stuff. And so one of their goals would have been to back-engineer, if you will, and to learn as much as possible. And, you know, when I say it's not just examining pieces of material, for example, but you might say, what colors appeared as this thing made a right-angle turn? Or, you know, what angle did it go up at? Was it really straight up, or was it maybe 10 degrees off straight? And how quickly did it go backwards? And, you know, there are all kinds of observations, in other words, when you got pilots all over the place seeing these things and monitoring on radar so that you can get really a good handle on numbers of speeds and angles and all this kind of thing. So I find that was a very exciting thing. And incidentally, I have a personal preference. I want Richard Dreyfuss to play me in that movie.
Well, I do too. I think that would be suitable.
Know, interestingly, he was born in 1947.
Oh, well, it's a given
year
then.
of the Roswell incident. And,
I'm sure if you ask him, he will.
Well, I'm not in a position to ask him.
Although you may not be. Yeah.
I hope Bryce Zabel will, and you know, I think he could do a good job. And people have said, well, how about George Clooney? Hey, I'm not known for being a handsome guy. You know, I want somebody who can look like he can think well.
Yeah.
But so those two, I'm hoping that while I'm still alive, these two get made, and I can say that 2 of my books have been made into movies.
Well, it sounds like they're going to stick to the real story as well, and not
that's right.
Hype it up.
Although I have been warned, these are not documentaries, Stan. So if there's a little artistic license, don't be surprised. And I've had other dealings with Hollywood. If people go to my website, www.stantonfriedman.com, they'll see some DVDs. UFOs are real, and recollections of Roswell. I've been involved in making movies, if you will, before. So I'm just looking forward to it. It might be a lot of fun. And maybe I can get out to California in the wintertime. It gets pretty cold back here.
Yes. Yes. If they could just plan it that way, that'd be great.
Yeah, the movies could make a real difference, I think. many people will remember, they've reminded me that James Earl Jones played Barney in a television movie on Universal Studios did in 1975.
Yes,
which was
saw
the
that.
story of Betty and Barney. And, of course, that was based on the first book, The Interrupted Journey by John Fuller. And our book updates all of that stuff, it's a long time since the mid-'60s.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's plenty of room for a new book. And one of the things that I focused on in our book Uncaptured is the star map work. Betty, under hypnosis, relives how she asked the leader where he's from. He showed her, I'll call it a star map. And she asked him, where are you on the map? Do you know where you are? No. How can I tell you where I am if you don't know where you're at? End of discussion. But fortunately, she was asked if she could remember what it looked like, and she drew it. And a brilliant woman named Margie Fish built 27 different three-dimensional models of our local neighborhood and was able to determine where the base stars in that map were. And they're important because it gives you a whole new concept. I was talking about before about, where we fit in the scheme of things and how many stars and planets and all that. Well, the base stars in that story, Zeta 1 and Zeta 2 reticuli. It's the constellation of reticulum, which means the net in Latin. Those two stars are unique. They're the closest to each other pair of sun-like stars in our entire local neighborhood. Now, we're accustomed to being out in the boondocks here. Next star over from the sun is about 5.3 light years away, 4.3. Anyway, these two stars from each other are only an eighth of a light year apart. So there's 30 times closer to each other than we are to the next star over. That's why I say we're in the boonies here.
Right.
And can you imagine the other star is visible all day long? And from a planet around one looking at the other, you can directly observe planets around the other one. And, little detail, they're a cool billion years older than the sun, and they're only 39.3 light years away. Now we hear people talking about, gee, if there's somebody as close as 1,000 light years, I don't care about 1,000 light years. I'm much more interested in 39.3. And so it affects our perspective and how different it would be to be in a situation like that than the way it is here. And not only are we discovering all these planets out there with the Kepler satellite, I'm so impressed with that satellite. I mean, it's like being able to detect a butterfly going in front of an automobile light a mile away from you and changing the amount of light you get from that light. It's incredible.
It is amazing.
Yeah, and so, it wasn't too many years ago that people thought, well, there's no way you could observe another planet. The stars are too bright, Well, we're observing lots of them. And so I was the first to publish about that star map work, and it gives us an entirely different perspective on, how far do you have to look. I hear people talking about, gee, look how much energy it would take to get it to another galaxy. Andromeda's 2 million light years away. I don't care about Andromeda. I'm interested in Zeta Reticuli, 39 light years away, not 39 million. So it's within reach. Now, I will admit that the SETI guys, SETI stands for Silly Effort to Investigate. Some people get mad when I say that, but that's right. They say, well, we listened to Zeta Reticuli, and we didn't hear anything. Well, they haven't heard anything from anybody out there. The notion that aliens out there are sending us signals that using technology appropriate to our primitive state of technology. Like I said, we've had long-distance radio for 111 years. That's not very long when there are stars out there a billion years older than the sun, So I think we need to reconsider our role and to try to learn something, how much sooner would you develop interstellar travel if you had a neighbor down the street, in other words, and you had an extra billion years to do it in?
Exactly. And their form of communication is going to be a lot different. In fact, I've remote viewed that, and this is one thing that I haven't discussed with you yet. On the communication part, I see light, beams of light.
Well, there are people who have talked about the fact that even though we've only had lasers for, I guess it's 51 years now, we already can build lasers powerful enough to send a signal that could be intercepted at another star system, which is pretty remarkable when you think about
it. It is. I didn't know that. I didn't know we had that.
It's true. Well, we are in a position where we can listen. Listen is not quite the word, but look for sudden bursts of very intense light from other star systems that you could see despite the fact that light's coming from the star itself. And there is an active effort. Dr. Horowitz at Harvard, at least, was looking for it some time for laser signals. Now, you can't pick those up with a radio telescope, wrong frequency, you understand.
Mm-hmm.
But, so you've heard about light, huh? Very interesting.
Well, I remote
that.
viewed it, and I saw communication between ETs being with light, or done with light, for long distances.
Okay. That doesn't violate any laws of physics. There are people looking. Now, I'm sure their technology would be more advanced than ours, but the fact that with just 50 years behind us, we already can talk about doing that. And lasers didn't exist more than 50 years ago. So, my motto is that technological progress comes from doing things differently in an unpredictable way. The future is not an extrapolation of the past, in other words. And the guys who invented the laser were certainly not talking about using it for communicating to the stars or drilling holes in baby bottle nipples or in steel, or we do a zillion other things with lasers. It's remarkable achievement. The physicists deserve the credit, of course, but who knows what other new technologies are out there. But light, huh? I like that, Margie. That's a good one.
Well, we'll see. I guess someday we might know if that's true. But yeah. And speaking of SETI, what do you think about Dr. Jill Tarter's resignation?
Well, I just wrote a column that will be in the next issue, I guess, of the MUFON Journal. And I pointed out that Dr. Tarter has been an active figure in SETI, of course, for a long time, 30-some years. She just retired from her technical work, listening for signals with various radio telescopes, to being a fundraiser for SETI, because they need money.
Oh.
And she says she's not given up on searching for extraterrestrial intelligence. I mean, when you've been looking at the brass ring, on a cosmic scale, which I don't think it is, if they were to pick up a signal, that would be the ultimate. Come on, if a government stood up and said, hey, aliens are visiting, and there's going to be a big conference next month with Earthling countries and aliens, that would shake things up.
Yeah, exactly.
But, hey, Marge, we just picked up a signal. Isn't that wonderful? Why?
Maybe they ought to change their radio telescopes to light telescopes.
Well, yeah, they've done some of that. But the kicker is that SETI intentionally avoids dealing with the UFO data. That's the crazy thing. They're supposedly looking for extraterrestrial intelligence. But they're not. They're looking for radio signals.
Why are they so close-minded?
Well, because if aliens were visiting, why would you be listening with a radio telescope? Learn sign language.
Stanton, can you put your mouth a little bit closer to the mic on the phone?
Okay.
It's not coming through too clear.
Oh, sorry about that.
Okay, there we go. That's better.
Okay, that's better.
Yes, it is. Okay. So,
yeah, the SETI notions are really very strange. And Jill herself, a couple of years ago, I did a column about the fact that she was talking about Frank Drake had said there might be as many as 8,000 or 10,000 places in the galaxy that could communicate. And there might be one as close as 1,000 light years. Now, Jill picked up on that and said, maybe we can make contact with them, and it'll be the greatest discovery in man's history, and they'll help us solve our problems. And I'm sitting here saying, wait a minute now. Hey, you guys, I need some help. 2,000 years later, you get a signal from them. What can we do for you? Does that make any sense? Not to me, it doesn't. So, 1,000 light years is rather different from 39. I don't understand the community other than they want to keep their jobs. That's understandable, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But let's not kid ourselves into thinking that they're looking for extraterrestrial intelligence. They're listening for signals. We ufologists, on the other hand, are indeed looking for extraterrestrials. That's the whole story of the captured the Betty and Barney Hill UFO experience. They found us. I can't say we found them. And that's very different. And, it's interesting. I think there will be PhD theses done within the next 50 years. I won't be around. But, trying to figure out why the SETI community was so close-minded. They will keep telling you there is no UFO evidence. Now, I reference their books. They don't reference mine. I talk about 5 large-scale scientific studies. Says Shostak heard me give a lecture. I asked after each one, how many people here have read this? He hadn't read any of them. Now, he admitted on Coast to Coast that he had a copy of my book. I'd sent him one on his nightstand. He didn't say he'd read it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there is a chapter on the cult of SETI. I'm trying to intrigue him. We did a debate on Coast to Coast. I won 57-33, and 10% said, I don't know who won. I don't think I'll put out a public challenge. I'll take any of them on now. I don't think they want to, though, because they'd have to do some homework, and they don't want to do that.
It almost appears as if they know what's going on, and they maybe really do believe there are UFOs visiting the Earth, but is there some kind of clandestine cover-up?
Well, by definition, the cover-up is clandestine, I guess.
Yeah.
That would be an interesting question, and incidentally, and I mentioned this in my last column, which you'll see in the MUFON Journal, my choice for which of the SETI people might be operating undercover, if you will, would be Frank Drake. And people say, why? Why not Carl Sagan? I went to school with Carl. He was never in the military. He once was arrested for protesting nuclear tests and so forth. Frank, on the other hand, got his bachelor's in electrical engineering, then went into the Navy and worked on electric countermeasures. And that means a very high-level security clearance. And he was in the military for 3 years in the Navy. Then he went to Harvard to get the first degree in radio astronomy, really. And he stayed in the reserve for 10 years, and the commander of the Naval Reserve Unit in Cambridge, Massachusetts, was none other than Donald Menzel, who was on the Majestic 12 group. And the Navy, all the groups, military groups, like to use very bright guys like Frank or Carl or whatever during their summer vacation. Menzel himself, in his unpublished autobiography, said that he had a greater income from his consulting activities than he did from his Harvard work on retirement. So maybe Frank will come clean.
There are some clues there.
Yeah.
And you being the investigator, you're the one who noticed this and brought it up. I mean, most people, are not doing that research to find that out.
Well, I'll tell you, I learned something. When I first saw the Majestic 12 documents, and it mentioned Donald Menzel, everybody else made sense when you do a little historical research. But Menzel, he was a total debunker. He was a skeptic, did 3 anti-UFO books, gave papers. His first book was translated into Russian, kept them from getting involved in ufology. How could he be part of this group that knew all about crash saucers and all that stuff? Well, I had to get permission from 3 different people. I went to the Harvard archives and got a look at his papers and was totally shocked to find that he had a top-secret Umbra clearance, that he did classified work for the CIA, the FBI, and 30 different companies. He was a world-class cryptographer, codebreaker, and he was up to his ears in classified work. And he even told John F. Kennedy, whom he knew because Kennedy was on the board of overseers at Harvard, and his area of interest was astronomy, so he got to know Menzel quite well. Menzel got to know him quite well. And he wrote to John F. Kennedy, that one, at the time of after the election, that there's an area where I might be able to help you quite a bit, talking about the National Security Agency. I've had a longer continuous association with them than anybody else in the country, more than 30 years as of 1960. When we are properly cleared to each other, I can tell you more. Now, this is telling the guy who has just been elected president, you understand?
Yes.
So that came as a real shock to me, and I did a lot of digging, and I didn't like Menzel when he was alive, but I developed a great appreciation for him later. And so here's the last guy you'd expect to be, right in the middle of ufology, and yet he had all these clearances that nobody knew about, and there's proof of that, incidentally. Sky and Telescope, which is a major astronomical magazine, semi-pop, if you will.
Stan, let me ask you to hold that thought, and we'll continue it in just a minute on the other side of the break. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back.
Listening to the new Global Radio Alliance, a new knowledge for a new world.
Oh! I am so tired of struggling with my company's advertising issues when I have a business to run. What am I going to do?
4-Leaf Creative is your one-stop advertising shop. We handle everything from branding and logo design, print, outdoor, online, broadcast, signage, publication ads, and more. You name it, and we'll do it. See our ad and names and numbers and visit 4leafcreative.com today. 4-Leaf Creative. This is your lucky day.
UnX News Magazine covers the hottest topics in our unexplained world. Leading investigators in their fields discuss real events experienced by real people. Topics include UFOs, ET encounters, ghost hunting, interdimensional travel, ley lines, Bigfoot, crop circles, and much more. Writers include Grant Cameron, Art Campbell, Mac Maloney, Lauren Cutts, and others. Regular features include a list of the best paranormal radio shows, paranormal associations, and the Astrology Corner by Linda Berry. Get your printed copy or download the quarterly UnX News magazine at lulu.com or unxnews.com. Visit unxnews.com for more information. That's unxnews.com.
The publisher of UnX News Magazine is Margie Kay, host of the UnX News Radio, airing Fridays at 8 p.m. Eastern on the Global Radio Alliance.
Now you can share the topics that drive the discussions of your favorite talk shows with TalkStream Live's topic-driven talk radio. List and promote real-time talk radio topics, or post the topics that you want to hear. Hot topics are tweeted and retweeted and include simple click-to-listen audio links. The future of talk radio is topic-driven talk radio. Available now at TalkStreamLive.com.
Join us on Facebook for GRA alerts, show announcements, giveaways, up-to-date news and alternative media, and more. Everything you need in one place. Facebook search Global Radio Alliance and like us. Hit the like button and have a shot at winning your favorite DVDs, CDs, autographed books, tickets to your favorite conferences, expos, and symposiums, and more. Be connected to the best alternative talk radio network on the planet. The new Global Radio Alliance. You found the paranormal powerhouse of alternative talk radio. The new Global Radio Alliance.
And we're back with Stanton Friedman. Stanton, I'm going to go ahead and let you finish your thought that you were in the middle of before the break.
I can't even remember what I was talking about. No.
Well, yeah, we got talking about other things over the break. There is a question I wanted to ask you about some of the recent UFO sightings. As you know, I'm the Assistant State Director for Missouri MUFON, so yeah. I see a lot of the cases that come into this state. And lately, we have just been bombarded with sightings. And in the past month, I think we have about 50 sightings of the state.
Wow.
Most of them in the greater Kansas City area. And, what do you think about these mass sightings? Do you think that people are just reporting more often now and because they're not afraid to talk about it? Or do you think there really are more sightings happening?
Well, that's why I mentioned I've asked my audiences, at the end of my lecture, and people are shocked that 10% believe they've seen one, but then 90% didn't report what they saw. Mm-hmm. So I think if the press has changed its attitude about UFOs, I think, a little more because of the Kepler stuff and the other noises about life in outer space and all that sort of stuff. And I think more people are willing to report what they saw. But how many did MUFON have last month? Was it 700? I don't know, some number like that. That got reported to them. So I've never been able to determine whether, it's how many you are getting versus how many that are occurring. If you double the percentage, from 10% report to 20% report, that would double the number of sightings, seemingly. So, I don't know. I've detected a change in tone, media tone maybe, and stories, the press has gone, this Kepler stuff has got them excited. And, if you were to talk about life in outer space, say 60 years ago, you'd have been looked at awful strangely, but let's say 70 years ago. And when people talk about Roswell, they don't realize that if you look at the press coverage at that time, July 1947, practically nobody even suggested the possibility that we were dealing with extraterrestrials. Kenneth Arnold, whose famous sighting on June 24th, started the publicity ball rolling thought it was secret American systems. The atom bomb had been secret, so it wouldn't be too surprising if we were developing new and different and better airplanes, stuff like that. They weren't talking about Martians. That was War of the Worlds, so to speak. That's another story that's gotten a lot of play, incidentally, which may have a big impact, I don't know, on when this guy, Charles Chase Brandon, definitely a CIA guy for more than 30 years. People have known about him because he advises Hollywood on movies, and he's written science fiction books. Now, his announcement last month, in June, on Coast to Coast, that he, when in the late 90s, was at a particular CIA facility, and looking around, he had the clearances and stuff. He saw a box marked Roswell. So what the heck? He looked inside, and much to his shock, Roswell was real, he says. He has said publicly, said it on Coast to Coast and several other milieu, was real, and there were cadavers, was the term he used, retrieved. And, people have been dumping on him. How do we know who he is and all the rest? Well, I've talked to some English PhD candidates, and they've been looking at movies in Hollywood and UFOs, and they've known about Chase as a CIA guy, really is, and working with Hollywood movie producers and so forth. Give them advice and make sure they don't say anything bad about the CIA, I guess. And that story has got quite a bit of attention and has been played, fairly straight. Huffington Post, which is big on the internet and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Lee Spiegel, who's been involved in ufological stuff since the 70s and the United Nations session about UFOs. I was participated in that, so I've known Lee since back then. He's done a couple of excellent articles. He's met with Chase Brandon. It's not somebody he just talked to on the phone. He met in person with him.
Wow.
And so this could shake things up a lot. And, of course, the CIA says, well, we couldn't find any box of Roswell stuff. Should I believe them? I don't think so. The first time they've lied. I'm sure that comes as a surprise to your listeners that I would accuse the CIA of lying, but they have a track record of lying. As a matter of fact, if you want some exciting UFO documents, you can get from the CIA a bunch of top-secret Umbra UFO documents, which are all blacked out except for a word here or there. Many pages have 6 words you can read on them, and the excuse is, well, it's all sources and methods information. You got 6 words and everything else is sources and method, but it's filed under CIA UFO? Come on. That's pretty ridiculous. Now, they're not as bad as the NSA, National Security Agency. Never says anything is what NSA really stands for, or no such agency. That's the inside joke. Anyway, you can get 156 old top-secret Umbra NSA UFO documents. You can read 1 sentence per page. Everything else is whited out. Again, because it's all sources and methods information, except for that 1 sentence, which makes absolutely no sense at all. So where's the press when you need them? Where's the New York Times, all the news that's fit the print? Except we don't want to deal with UFOs sensibly. But,
yes, you have to go elsewhere to get coverage for that. Which, thanks to the internet. Now, we hear everything.
I'm glad that Lee Spiegel has been on this case and that he's met with him and with Chase Brandon. And the funniest thing is that when I first heard about that, I said, wait a minute, Chase Brandon? The producer of my movie, UFOs Are Real, back in 1979, was Brandon Chase.
That's kind of ironic.
Yeah, I looked at that and said, wait a minute, somebody's pulling my leg here, but they weren't.
Oh, wow.
Strange
I guess
world.
that could be attributed to coincidence.
I guess. I don't know what else to call it. But, as a matter of fact, in Cincinnati at the MUFON Symposium, I will show a picture of Lee Spiegel and Chase Brandon together.
Well, tell us a little bit about the MUFON Symposium coming up that you're going to be speaking at.
Well, it'll be Friday, Saturday, and Sunday at the Marriott. It's in Covington, Kentucky, but it's right across the river from Cincinnati. And one of the features of this thing, besides my lecture Sunday evening, is the banquet, the final banquet lecture is mine. All day Sunday, there's going to be a tour of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base Air Force Museum, which has lots of far-out airplanes, all kinds of stuff that you can't see anyplace else. I've been to Wright-Pat before. I worked on a contract with them back in the early 60s, but about Russian nuclear reactors for space applications, as a matter of fact. But so a lot of people are, I'm sure, looking forward to taking that tour. It's not far away, 40 miles or something like that. And so I will be speaking. Kathleen Marden will be speaking about abductions, and Don Schmidt will be speaking about Roswell. And if they go to MUFON.com and just look up the 2012 Symposium, they'll get the whole scoop. And it's a really good opportunity to meet the speakers, to talk to other people with like interests, to get autographs on books, and stuff like that, because the speakers are available. They want us to be there at vendor tables and stuff. And for me, it's like going home. My first job out of college was working for General Electric Aircraft Nuclear Propulsion Department, Cincinnati. And one of my most embarrassing moments in a lot of years of traveling was when I first went down to Cincinnati. I was in college to do my interview, and I thought I was on the right airplane, and we're getting ready to land, and they're saying we're landing in Kentucky. And I'm thinking, I got on the wrong airplane. How did I do that? I would swear it said Cincinnati. Well, the Greater Cincinnati Airport is over in Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
It was
I had the same thing happen. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing you there. I will definitely be there, and looking forward to this entire symposium and the tour of Wright-Patterson. Going to try to drag my husband out to this one.
Well, it's worth. Like I say, Wright-Patterson's a big place. Anywhere from 20 to 30,000 people working there.
Goodness.
Depending over the years, and so it's not just a few guys. I had a young guy call me. He and his friends were going to attack the gate and go inside and find those alien bodies. I said, wait a minute, you ever been there?
I don't think so.
Well, no. I said, I have. I spent a lot of time there, and you ain't going to do no such thing. The security is tight there, and I needed an escort even though I had a clearance. And but it was funny. People just don't have an idea of what goes on there, all kinds of stuff.
I've got a question from this chat room. He says, has Stanton ever been threatened by those in power?
No, although I once had a phone call saying, how come you're still alive, Stan? I said, what do you mean? Well, you say the government's covering things up, Cosmic Watergate and stuff. You'd think they'd go after you. And I said, anybody who's listened to me at any length knows that I'm a believer in national security. And so I don't say, I'm not trying to get people to break security. If you're trying to solicit classified information from somebody and you don't have a need to know and clearance for it, that's treason. I mean, that's actionable. You can't do that. Mm-hmm. So I'm careful in what I say. And my final line is that, look, I'm probably doing exactly what they want. Get the world ready for when the big announcement comes so it's not such a shock. I'm patting myself on the back. I must have some influence with 700 lectures. And go to YouTube, and I don't know where people got all those old videos. So, no, I haven't been threatened, and I hope I keep it that way.
Yeah, well, I certainly hope so, too. Have you ever seen a UFO?
No, but as I point out to people, I've never seen a neutron or a gamma ray. I chased them for 14 years, and Kathleen Martin and I almost saw one. We were being interviewed in the dark in New Hampshire, right near where the abduction took place. And there's a big celebration this year, the second annual 14th, 15th, 16th. It's on my website, www.stantonfriedman.com. Anyway, we're being interviewed. The guy's down on the road. We're up a little hill, trees all over, no lighting. And he suddenly says in the middle of the interview, "That's a cameraman. What's that over your head?" So naturally we look, and there's some strange lights up there. One here, and then next to it, and then next to it, and next to it. When we went back to the hotel, two of the people who worked there said, "Hey, we got to talk to you. We saw a UFO earlier today." And when they drew their little sketches, it matched what we had seen. And we thought, wow, because this was filmed. Well, we turned it over to the MUFON guy in New Hampshire, Peter Jeremiah, a good investigator, and he's convinced it was the Vermont National Guard dropping battlefield flares, practicing dropping them. These are not the flares you put next to your car when it's got a flat tire on the road. These are so you can shoot all the enemy on the ground,
Right,
so,
big flares.
We're satisfied with that explanation. But for a moment, we thought maybe so.
Darn. Well, someday maybe you'll see one.
Maybe so. That would be nice.
I've got another question out of the chat room. Does Stanton think Chase Brandon has broken his oath to the CIA? And if so, will they ever prosecute him?
Well, that's a tricky question. In talking about it with Lee Spiegel and others, I think he did cross a line because he's dealing with something, a black project, if you will. The very notion that they're considered these things real in itself would be classified. And Lee has talked to him about, are they going to take your pension away? And now the government's caught in a catch-22 situation. If they do something bad to him, they're admitting that he was right, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a tricky situation. And the story isn't over yet. It'll be interesting to see what comes out of this.
Have you ever spoken to anyone in the Air Force or an astronaut who has claimed to have seen UFOs?
Oh, sure. Gordon Cooper, for example. The guy who wrote the foreword for Flying Saucers in Science is Dr. Edgar Mitchell, sixth man to walk on the moon. And he says Roswell is real. He grew up around Roswell, as a matter of fact, and has talked to high-level people who have assured him that that's the case. He isn't saying who they are, though. He's been a little more careful.
Right.
I've talked to Bill Anders, who was on Apollo 8, I guess, the one that went around the moon but didn't land. And we met at a meeting of the American Nuclear Society. We'd met before, but we were each chairing a session at the meeting. And we got to talk, and we spent a couple hours talking about UFOs. He bought copies of everything I had with me. He was clearly very interested. But when I asked him about astronaut sightings, well, I don't think there was anything that couldn't be identified. And it sounded very much like a man who was talking from behind security. I know, having had a clearance, you sometimes try to avoid, answering directly. And so his attitude told me he was very interested in the fact that he bought all this stuff. But he wasn't about to own up to say he or anybody else had seen one. So, yeah, the astronauts are quite friendly. Gordon Cooper sent a letter to the United Nations. Well, I mentioned Lee Spiegel before. Gordon sent a letter saying he had seen some when he was flying airplanes in Europe. Couldn't get up high enough to attack them, but...
Got a question from Chet. What is Stanton's view of Philip Corso's unpublished manuscript, Dawn of a New Age?
I haven't seen that manuscript, but there's a piece on my website, www.stantonfriedman.com, which has about sort of fraud in ufology, and awful lot of things about Phil Corso that says you can't believe what he says. I don't like saying that, but it's true. For example, he claimed in a sworn statement that he was a member of the President's National Security Council. I checked with the Eisenhower Library. Not only was he not a member, he never attended a meeting. I asked him how he knew the date of what happened at Fort Riley. He said July 6th. He saw a body and wreckage from Roswell and so forth. And, well, I know when I was transferred there. Well, it turns out that was February or March, and July 6th just doesn't seem to compute with what we know about what happened at Roswell. And there were several other claims that he made that simply weren't true. I'm very dubious. I think he was a wannabe. And, everybody was calling him colonel. He didn't become a colonel until after he retired, which, according to other colonels, means he really didn't have that much on the ball. And there were only two guys in the Foreign Technology Division of the Army in General Trudeau's place. Only two, and he was the junior officer. A lot of people thought he was really talking about FTD, Foreign Technology Division at Wright-Patterson. And I had dealings with them, and there were lots of engineers and scientists there. Well, he wasn't an engineer or a scientist, and if you notice in his book, there are no references. We're supposed to believe that he got all this stuff into industry, but one of the things was microcircuits. A guy got a Nobel Prize for work done 3 years before Corso was even there. So there's a lot of dubiosity, if I can use that term.
Okay.
Sorry.
What about Frank Kembler's analysis of the Roswell wreckage? What do you think about that?
Well, Frank is another entirely different matter. I've met him. I've been on panels with him in Roswell, saw him just a few weeks ago. Good, sharp guy. Some people are saying his data proves that the pieces that he found using metal detectors and stuff, that the isotope ratios for magnesium don't match any on Earth. That's going past his data. I looked carefully at his data, and his measurements were within limits, error bars of the established values. So, and I asked Frank about that, and he agreed that we can't yet say that these things are extraterrestrial. But he's trying. He's looking. He's finding. He's getting work done. And I'm expecting more data from him. He's got to have other people look at the samples. And that could be very exciting. He's honest and decent and so forth. I can only say good things about him. I was very impressed.
Do you know about the work that Debbie Ziegelmeyer and Chuck Zukowski have done at the Roswell site? And are those pieces the possible wreckage that we're talking about that's been analyzed?
Well, they're not the same stuff as Frank had. There's a lot of people, what I'm anxious to hear, there's a guy named Art Campbell who found stuff out in the plains of San Augustine.
Yeah.
And who is having some work done, and we may get something. They found some interesting things out there, but not definitive yet. So it isn't enough to say you found some stuff out there, and it's not always easy to prove something is extraterrestrial, because we don't have many samples from out there, so we can say, oh, it's all different from here. Well, not necessarily.
Yeah, I did some work
that's
with
in my gray
Art.
basket. It's in my gray basket.
Did some work with Art Campbell on that, remote viewing those objects, and this before he had testing done on them. He had me look at them, and on one of the objects I saw. Well, let me back up. What I saw was a crash, an alien being. They knew they were going to crash ahead of time. There were at least two of them in the vehicle. But this one was crushed, and he was wearing a blue suit. Well, on one of the objects that was found at the site, there was a microscopic blue fiber on it.
Wow.
And nobody knew that ahead of time. And one of the objects I saw was a heart, but it sat low in the abdomen, and there was a wire connecting it to a button on the outside of the suit. And so
Wow.
their analysis now, they believe that it is some type of a biological body part with, what do you call the flaps?
Cyborg?
Anyway, that might be a heart. And they also found a microscopic piece of copper wire.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think that a lot more work needs to be done on that, but they did some analysis, and the result was that it was not from Earth, that this metal was not from Earth.
Well, I was hoping Art was writing a book, but, I want to see the book.
Yeah, I want to see the book too. Got to get that one done. So, anyway, do you have any more books in the works?
No, not at the moment. All 5 of mine are listed on the website, and they'll be available at MUFON. And Kathy and I have talked about maybe doing another one, but she's working on one about abductions, which should hopefully be out within a year, and that's exciting. She's MUFON's abduction person, and
right, she's
I'm glad
collecting.
Because she really knows what she's talking about.
She's collecting data from people, doing surveys.
Yeah.
So now you've got a lot of things coming up, some events you're speaking at, and those are listed on your website.
Yeah.
Besides the symposium, you're going to be
there's
at
a tour in New Mexico of Trinity Site, first atomic bomb, and Roswell and Los Alamos, and all kinds of interesting places. I did this back in April, and it's fascinating especially for people who haven't been to New Mexico and have no idea how different it is from the rest of the country. That's one thing. There are a couple of meetings down or conferences in Texas. Presidio, Texas, which I'd never even heard of before. And I'll be in Laredo, Texas. That's exciting. And, so there's plenty going on. And I'm probably going down to Brazil for another lecture, too, in November. So we're keeping at it.
Are you still doing investigation work?
Rarely. Hey, I'm talking a lot.
Yeah, you are. You are a super busy guy. You're one of the busiest people in ufology that I know. Well, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today, Stanton.
It's been a pleasure, and I hope we do it again where we have more goodies to report.
Yes, I certainly hope so. Well, this has been an excellent show today, and I appreciate my listeners. Be sure to join us again next week. This is Margie Kay, signing off for this time.